tribes and trees are symbols of life and mystery, hidden in the most remote corners of the world. However, some of these trees and tribes hide dark and fascinating secrets that may surprise you. In this edition, you will discover the most unusual tribes and the deadliest trees on the planet, from those that kill without a trace to those that look like they're straight out of a horror movie. And if you feel that same spark of intrigue and passion to unearth more hidden truths, don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel. It's free and will take you on endless, fascinating adventures that will transform your perception of the natural and cultural world. Let's get started. Number 1. The Amazons. The Amazons are a people from ancient Greek mythology composed exclusively of women. They did not tolerate men and went on expeditions under the strict control of their leader, thus forming a warrior state. According to legend, the Amazons were descended from Ares and Harmonia, and in order to reproduce, they had brief relationships with men from other peoples. If a boy was born, they gave him to the parents and got rid of him. If a girl was born, they raised her and made her into a new independent Amazon. It may seem that this sounds too magical and should not be true, but in reality, it is not so. For example, in the 1st century, in one of the African states, a real group of physically fit women was formed, whose task was to hunt elephants. This group of hunters impressed the ruler so much that he decided to make them his bodyguards, and subsequently they became a whole female military tribe, the so-called Dahomey. They began their service at the age of 8 and really instilled fear in everyone who faced these terrible warriors. Although they rarely fought, they stood out as very good fighters. The group of female warriors was called Mino, which in the local language meant our mothers. When the Amazons reached a new level of honor, they began to go through a special training course, wore military uniforms, and were equipped with Dutch weapons. At that time, the Mino numbered about 6,000 women. That is a third of the entire Dahomey army. It cannot be said that this decision of the state leadership was wrong. These Amazons could be sent on expeditions into the jungle with only a machete, and with its help, they made their way through dense vegetation and dealt with heavily armed enemies in the most unusual ways. According to people who miraculously survived after meeting them, the Amazons had such developed skeletons and muscles that it was possible to distinguish them from men only by the presence of breasts. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, the modern world of technology and new weapons changed the balance of power somewhat, and the Amazons were eventually defeated. The last Amazon of Dahomey died in 1979 at the age of 100. Number 2. The Sentinelese. The Sentinelese is the name of the next surprising people living on the island of the same name, North Sentinel. The area of this territory is about 60 square kilometers and is officially administered by India. However, if you look a little closer, it becomes clear that the real owners of the island are the ruthless tribe living there. The local authorities are aware of them, but they do not want to interfere in the life of the Sentinelese because of the high probability of introducing diseases to which the locals have no immunity. Despite the damage caused to the island by the 2004 tsunami, it was confirmed that there were survivors. A few days after the tsunami, an Indian government helicopter observed how several inhabitants tried to scare them away with arrows. This was the last and most important indicator that one should not approach or land on the island under any circumstances. It is inhabited by former residents who successfully exist there and develop their own culture. Number 3. Sentinelese life. What do they do there? Well, probably the same as thousands of years ago. These people live by gathering and hunting. They have no agriculture. Do they know how to make fire? The question remains open, but the answer is probably yes. Scientists, during one of the flights, noticed how the Sentinelese kept embers in special clay pots. They probably know how to make fire by friction, but they do not want to spend time on this exhausting task. They find the process of protecting their home much more fun and meaningful. It is known that they are one of the most isolated tribes in the world. As soon as a stranger comes across their land, they immediately shoot him with poisoned arrows or spears. The Sentinelese live quite modestly in huts designed for 3 or 4 people. Interestingly, no local children have been captured by the scientists' cameras, probably because the elders hide them well. However, it is likely that the people simply did not distinguish themselves. According to other data, they are about 150 centimeters tall. They are quite short people. This is known because we once tried to establish contact with them. The first attempt was made in the 1960s. An expedition consisting of scientists and a photojournalist approached the shore under a hail of arrows. The islanders allowed gifts to be dropped off, after which the visitors left. The gifts, which included coconuts, pigs, toys, utensils, and various metal and plastic objects, were received sparingly. The coconuts were eaten almost immediately. The pig was killed and buried along with the doll. The utensils and red buckets were taken away, but not the green ones. People began to think that contact had been established. They came a second time, but the level of aggression only increased. Modern scientists continued to leave gifts on the shore without making contact, but at some point, the Sentinelese stopped maintaining contact with the outside world. Number 4. Unusual tribe from Brazil. Another group that also does not want to come into contact is an unusual tribe from Brazil, whose representatives were found not so long ago somewhere in the jungle. Researchers were flying over the forests of northern Brazil with the help of a drone and accidentally noticed people armed with bows and arrows. They all lived in a large communal house, and near them there was a plantation of crops. It can also be noted that these people use primitive tools such as axes. The name and ethnicity of the tribe remain unknown since no one has had contact with them, and they themselves have never appeared in the outside world. However, there is nothing wrong with this. Scientists believe that these people have the right to live in isolation until they decide to contact us, or until an emergency situation requires the state to contact them. Number 5. The Clay People. Clay People. How do you imagine our next unusual guests? If I heard this phrase for the first time, I would imagine them made of this material. But fortunately, it is not so serious. The inhabitants of this tribe are called Asaro, and they make headgear from clay. In other words, masks that distinguish them. Although with them, the Papuans look more like alien beings than earthly creatures. There are quite a few photos of the representatives of this tribe. For example, they regularly organize a fascinating show in the city of Goroka in Papua New Guinea. At this show, the Asaro are happy to show tourists their authentic masks. Most of them, it should be noted, look simply terrifying. Huge tusks, proportional ears, smiles, fangs, horns, and all this combined. It is surprising how they have such imagination for this. The whole spectacle becomes even more creepy with the clay with which they smear their bodies from top to bottom. According to legend, this tribe was once invaded. The people were forced to flee to the nearest river and cover themselves in mud to look like the spirits. This crazy plan worked and the enemies left them alone. Since that day, friendship with mud is an integral part of their existence. And yet, as creepy as they may seem, this tribe is harmless, and that is the most important thing. Number 6. The Korowai. The same cannot be said of our next guests. They live in trees and have also gained a reputation as cannibals. But let's take it one step at a time. The Korowai are a Papuan tribe living in the southeastern part of the Indonesian province of Papua. Their population is estimated at about 3,000 people. Interestingly, only a few of the entire tribe are literate, so contacts with them are limited. In addition, they live quite hidden. They were discovered only a few decades ago. Guess where? In the treetops. It turned out that this was not a coincidence, but something normal and everyday for them. They are used to building houses in trees at a height of up to 50 meters. They believe that in this way, they can protect themselves from evil spirits and wild animals. Inside each dwelling, there are at least 2 hearths, one for men and one for women with children. Among the Korowai, polygamy is common, so there can be several hearths in one house. They feed mainly on the sago tree, consuming it almost entirely except for the bark. The wood is ground into something resembling flour, which is not only nutritious, but also quite tasty. But the Korowai's true love is the larvae, which they consider a delicacy. When the weather is favorable, they also like to hunt. They do not know iron, so the tips of their arrows are made exclusively from stones or bones. From which bones? From their own companions, of course. This information is not confirmed, but it is said that the Korowai often kill their own companions who behave inappropriately. In this way, they maintain order in the tribe, obtain food, and make tools. As for how they treat strangers, I think you already imagined. A curious fact is that tobacco has come into the life of the Korowai. However, their clothing is minimal. They limit themselves to small loincloths. Number 7. The Herero. The same cannot be said about our next guests, who value fashion above all else. But before we talk about them, let's take a look at a photo a subscriber shared with me. The picture shows a sweet little kitten who was recently in a shelter. Fortunately, everything has now changed and he lives happily in a house surrounded by friends and owners. Only, unfortunately, the kitten doesn't have a name yet. Write in the comments what you would call him. He's a male. The Herero is the name of the tribe I wanted to tell you about. Their long, colorful, floor-length dresses make the women of this tribe one of the main fashionistas in Africa. They love extravagant outfits and everything connected with. This tribe is not as small as the previous ones. Its population is about 200,000 people who live mainly in Namibia. However, there are also tribes in Angola and Botswana. Most Herero living in rural areas are engaged in cattle breeding. Those who have moved to villages and cities are usually engaged in trade. Previously, these people dressed very simply, but with the arrival of Europeans, their life changed forever. Today, the national costume of Herero women consists of a long, colorful dress, the festive version of which has lace trim and more voluminous skirts. The head of Herero fashionistas is adorned with an unusual accessory called ojikava, the end of which symbolizes the horns of a cow. Yes, you got it right. The connection with livestock is not accidental. The members of this tribe respect agricultural work and are happy when they are compared to cows. Number 8. The Mentawai. The Mentawai, ladies and gentlemen, is the name of another unusual tribe that does not wear unique outfits. Their distinctive feature is immediately noticeable when they smile. The population of this Indonesian tribe is about 40,000 people. They are mainly engaged in manual agriculture, respect hunting and fishing. Sometimes they hunt deer or monkeys. If they live near the coast, they also collect mollusks or crustaceans. However, hunting for them is not just killing a random animal. It is a process that disrupts the harmony of nature. Therefore, before each hunt, they explain to the gods why and for what purpose they do it. The spirits of ancestors and deities are the most important thing for them. To protect themselves from evil spirits, the Mentawai hang skulls of dead animals under the ceiling and file their teeth until they look like shark teeth. This, of course, is surprising, but imagine the pain that members of this tribe endure to achieve the desired result. After all, teeth filing is done without any anesthesia. Number 9. The Wodabe. The next people I wanted to tell you about are called Wodabe, or Mbororo. They are people who live in the Sahel region of Nigeria. Talking about how they appeared, when it happened and all that, doesn't make much sense. So let's go straight to their main feature, beauty contests. It is interesting that men participate in these contests, and women make the final choice. Every year, at the end of September, an incredibly colourful and spectacular event is held, the Jerwal Festival, for which all the men of this nomadic tribe prepare meticulously. Shortly before the event, men look for the most beautiful adornments, empty the reserves of dyes and practice ritual dance. All this is done in order to attract the attention of girls and stand out from the crowd, win the contest and get not only fame, but also a wife. Here, a girl can announce her decision to get married. It is curious that all the colors that the Wodabe choose have a symbolic meaning that represents some phenomenon or character trait. A girl can choose her husband, even if she already has one. To do this, you just need to pat him on the shoulder. Such relationships are considered love marriages. In fact, if a wife gets bored with her current husband, she can choose another one. There are no punishments or restrictions for such actions. Poisonous plants. Let's change the subject a bit. Savage tribes have used plant poison to hunt and protect their settlements since time immemorial. What plants are these? I'll tell you now. 1. Cerbera. One of them is called Cerbera, after the monstrous dog Cerberus from mythology. If you forgot or didn't know, Cerberus was a 3-headed dog that guarded the exit from the realm of the dead and did not allow the dead to return to the world of the living. It must be said that whoever came up with the name of this tree was a true genius, as it is closely associated with the realm of the dead. Cerbera, specifically Cerbera odolam. This is a creepy tree that kills without a trace. The tree is dangerous for several reasons, all related to its extreme toxicity. All parts of the tree contain a potent poison called cerberin, which blocks the transmission of electrical impulses in the body, including the heart rate. In other words, it stops the heart. Cerbera is so toxic that you cannot even light a campfire from its branches, as the smoke would be very poisonous and not just irritating. The fruits of this tree are equally dangerous. At different stages, they resemble coconuts, nuts, apples, or mangoes, but they should not be eaten under any circumstances. After ingesting the fruit, death can occur in just 3 hours. Cerbera really leaves no traces. The poison acts without symptoms and dissolves quickly, so it is almost impossible to detect poisoning. The person simply dies from cardiac arrest, and if it is not known that he ate the fruit of the cerbera, the cause will never be known. The crushed seeds of the cerbera were previously used to poison undesirable people through food. It is also known as the suicide tree, as many people used it to take their own lives. Also, at certain times, it was used to execute people. There are enough reasons to call the cerbera the most dangerous tree on the planet. 2. Chamomile. This is a plant from Central America that is very similar to cerbera in terms of its poison. Chamomile is also an extremely toxic tree, although it does not look like it at first glance. Its leaves, bark, and fruits are poisonous. The fruits are especially deceptive, as they look like ordinary apples. There is a story of 2 girls who saw these fruits and tasted them. Although they tasted good, within a few minutes they began to feel burning in their mouths, difficulty breathing, and a sore throat. They felt better only after 8 hours. Now imagine if someone ate half of one of these fruits. Death would be certain. Chamomile juice is very toxic and corrosive. If the tree is cut or felled, the juice splashes everywhere and on contact with the skin causes burns. It is very dangerous to burn chamomile, as the smoke is toxic and hazardous to health. Even standing under the tree is dangerous, as the fallen leaves can also cause burns. The local Aborigines have known about these dangers for a long time. They carefully cut off the bark of the chamomile tree and use the juice to poison the tips of their arrows, creating a powerful weapon. If a poisoned arrow hits an enemy, he will soon die, even if the wound is not fatal. Since it is impossible to cut down or burn these dangerous trees, people decided to simply leave them alone. To protect themselves and others, they mark the chamomile trees with warning signs. 3. The Hura crepitans. Another tree that is best to stay away from is the Hura crepitans. This tree belongs to the same Euphorbiaceae family as the chamomile and is also poisonous. Its toxins are found in the thorns. Fortunately, it is visually obvious that the tree is not friendly. However, it is dangerous not only because of its thorns, but also because of its fruits, which are known as dynamite fruits. During flowering, the fruits can explode like a fragmentation grenade, scattering segments up to 100 meters away at a speed of up to 250 kilometers per h. If a fragment hits the eyes, blindness is guaranteed, and in general, the fragments can cause other injuries. 4. The Abrus precatorius. I'm sure you all know what prayer beads are. Some people use them to count prayers, and others simply use them as a prop to occupy their hands. But did you know that beads used to be made from one of the most dangerous plants on the planet? At least that's how it was done in India. It's a leguminous plant called Abro precatorio, also known as prayer rosary. This plant grows in India, but it's also grown in many other places around the world. In the past, beads were made from the seeds of this plant, which are extremely poisonous. If ingested, they cause severe dehydration and inflammation of the stomach and small intestine. Even inhaling the fumes from the seeds soaked in water can cause blindness. In the past, people making beads often accidentally pricked themselves with the seeds and poisoned themselves. Just one seed is enough to cause fatal poisoning. 5. The dragon blood tree. Another tree that is best to stay away from is the dragon's blood tree. This tree looks like a living monster. It is said to be one of the rarest and most mutated varieties of the African blood tree. In its classic form, it looks pretty normal, but it has a surprise: blood inside it. If you don't believe me, just look at the photos. The tree literally bleeds. This doesn't mean that the trees feel pain and suffer, as they have no pain receptors or nervous system. And it's not real blood, but an unusual sap that looks like blood due to its unique composition. This makes the tree visually creepy to people. although it's not very dangerous. However, animals tend to stay away from it, as its leaves slow down digestion and its strong aroma signals danger. 6. The dangerous pine cones of the Araucaria bidwilli. Can pine trees be dangerous? I'm sure many of you think that's nonsense. They grow in many places and nothing bad happens. But pine trees can be different. If we talk about the Araucaria bidwilli, the thing is not so simple. This pine, also known as bunya bunya, has incredible pine cones. They are huge. Mature pine cones can reach 35 centimeters in diameter and weigh up to 3 kilograms. Some claim to have found pine cones that weighed around 6 kilograms. Obviously, nothing will happen if a pine cone from an ordinary pine falls on a person, as they are almost harmless. But if one of these huge pine cones falls, don't expect anything good. Considering that the tree can reach 50 meters in height, the fall of a pine cone from that height is certain death or at least serious injury. Therefore, the bunya bunya is not a tree under which one can sit to relax or just take a walk. In other respects, the pine is not dangerous. Do you remember which family chamomile, the most dangerous tree in the world, belongs to? If you forgot, I remind you that it belongs to the Euphorbiaceae family, just like the milk tree, another of the most dangerous trees on this list. These trees grow in Southeast Asia, and in general, they cannot be said to be horrible. The wood is used in construction and even in medicine. Even if you just approach this tree, nothing bad will happen. It is not like a pine with mutant pine cones. But at the same time, you should not let your guard down. The sap of this tree is extremely poisonous. One wrong move, a broken twig, and there is a risk of contact with the very toxic sap. It is so poisonous that even normal contact with the skin can cause burns, blisters, and ulcers. The main thing is not to bring damaged hands to your eyes. If the sap gets into the eye, blindness is guaranteed. In general, contact with mucous membranes significantly increases the effect of the poison. 7. The Chilean puya. I've talked a lot about poisonous trees, but there are also trees that are not toxic and still pose a danger. One example is the Chilean puya, known locally as chagual. This endemic to Chile reminds me of a cactus. First, just like a cactus, the chagual can survive very high temperatures. Even the most extreme heat is no reason for it to dry out and die. The puya can even spontaneously catch fire. Scientists have observed this rare phenomenon several times, but have not had time to study it. Secondly, the puya is not a friendly plant. It is covered with hard, sharp thorns that stick out in all directions. There is a belief that this plant attracts sheep, immobilizing them and absorbing nutrients from their bodies, or even devouring them. This, of course, is a myth, but there is some truth to it. Sheep often get entangled in the puya and die on its thorns, as if they were caught in barbed wire. The puya also represents a danger to children and, in general, to anyone who gets tangled in it. The main thing is to stay away from the plant. 8. The Chilean Araucaria. In Chile, there is another dangerous plant, the Chilean Araucaria. From a distance, it looks like a common fir or pine, but when you look closely, you can see that it is covered in thorns. Although the puya is more dangerous in this respect, the Araucaria is interesting because it has existed on the planet for 200 million years, so it has seen the dinosaurs. The thorny branches protected the Araucaria from being eaten by herbivorous dinosaurs. 9. The splendid kiba. In South America, you can find many unfriendly plants that can pose a threat to your health. One of them is the Ceiba splendid, a rather tall tree found in the forests of Brazil, Bolivia, Argentina, Paraguay, and Peru. The trunk of the tree is green because it performs photosynthesis, but it is not covered with bark. Instead, the Ceiba protects itself from herbivores with epic thorns. The branches of the tree can also be covered with thorns. I think everyone understands the danger of this plant. 10. The castor oil plant and the rincon. Let's get back to something really dangerous. First of all, I have a question. Are there any fans of the series Breaking Bad among you? Give it a like if you like this series. I think everyone remembers that in several episodes, Walter White made ricin, a poison with which he solved various problems. Ricin is obtained from castor beans, which grow on the castor bean plant. Everyone who watched the series remembers that ricin is a miracle poison that leaves no traces and neutralizes a person in a guaranteed way. In general, this is true. Ricin is extremely poisonous, causes many unpleasant symptoms, disrupts the fluid balance in the body, and leads to death within a few days. If the victim of ricin survives, he will never be able to fully regain his health, since ricin irreversibly destroys proteins in human tissues. Ricin is dangerous even when inhaled, not just when ingested. In this case, it affects the lungs, which will also not be able to fully recover. Also, it is not recommended to touch castor beans with bare hands, as it can cause itching. With all these factors, castor beans can be considered one of the most dangerous plants on the planet. Surprisingly, many people grow them as an ornamental plant in their gardens. And with this, we come to the end of our tour of the most unusual tribes and the most dangerous trees in the world. Which of these facts surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe for more fascinating stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.